Hi, I'm Mahmoud, and today I want to talk to you about song structures and arrangement. Today, I want to jump into a topic that is as broad as it is deep, and that is songwriting. But I just want to touch up on the basics of song structure. I feel that sometimes that's a bit overlooked. I get a lot of demos that maybe have a few awesome riffs, but they tend to repeat too much, or maybe there's not enough repetition, or not enough depth, or not enough changes. And oftentimes that can be remedied with the right structure. Before we get going with the tips that I want to talk about, I just want to say this. Songwriting is a language of its own. And just like learning any language, there are certain structures and mechanisms that you have to understand to form a coherent sentence. And the same kind of applies to music. And I mean, you don't need to know the grammar perfectly, but knowing what a noun, a verb, or an adjective is does help a lot. What I'm trying to say is know the basics of this beautiful language that we call music and learn a few chords, two or three scales, and if you're feeling adventurous, learn the notes too. Um, Knowing which chords sound good together will give you a huge leap up. And if you're writing for your metal project, that will probably mean learning the minor scale, the pentatonic scale, and maybe the Phrygian scale. That can be really, really cool. And a few chords should be enough. I mean, if you know your power chord, you're probably set. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump into the whole structure thing. We all know the classic pop song structure of intro, verse, chorus, maybe a bridge or like a special part, maybe another chorus, and an outro. The structure is a classic because it works, but it can also be a bit expected and maybe even boring. So, my first suggestion is to change up the verses. And today I'm going to be using my band Atropas's songs to showcase a few of those things. The first song that I want to get into is called Entropy. And let's go and check the first verse here, shall we? Now, I'm going to be muting the vocals for this purpose because I want to focus on what the drums, bass, and guitars are doing. So here's the verse of Entropy, the first verse. All right, that was the first verse. Very fast drums, snare on all four beats, double bass, and hi-hat. The guitar is just following the 16th notes and doing a bend. Super simple riff and very effective in what it does. This was in fact written by my bandmate Dave. Hi Dave, if you're watching this. Now, I want to jump ahead to the second verse, and let's listen to that first, and I'll explain the changes that we made during the songwriting process. All right, that was the second verse, and now let's focus on the changes that we made. Let's take a look at the drums first. Oh, well, no, actually, let's take a look at the guitars first, because the main riff is actually the same, with the difference that it's only one guitar doing the 16th notes, and the other guitar is doing an open string and just a bend together with the higher octave bend of the right guitar and doing the same bend just an octave lower. Now let's focus on the rhythm guitar and pay attention to what they're doing. And now they're back to being like in the first verse. The drums go into this super simple halftime beat, like here. And they're back to their to the original version of the verse. And that's my first tip. Change up the verses and you will get a lot of mileage even out of a simple idea such as this one. Now, before I move on to the next idea, I just want to touch up on what other options you could possibly have to change up the second verse. And sometimes simply adding a lead or a different melody can do wonders. You could also take things away. Maybe the second verse is just drums and bass. I mean, let's listen to how that sounds. If for some reason the song called for that. That could be an idea. Or if you feel more creative, you could even try adding a few different instruments, like a piano or synthesizer, and just make sure you try out things on your second verses, especially because that's probably one of the things that I will always tell the bands to do is figure out a different second verse. Usually they have a good first verse, a great chorus, and then the same first verse repeats, no changes at all. They go back into the chorus, and sometimes just changing up the second verse can do so much for a song. Let's go into a song called The River that uses completely different song structures from any of our other songs on the album. It starts out with this fake intro kind of thing, and after you think, okay, that's the verse, maybe it slows down and goes super crazy with the actual verse. Now, let me show that to you. That's the verse, and let me just quickly explain what happens after that. The actual verse comes in, some more twists and turns until we hit the chorus, and that's what I want to talk about here. The chorus has only 3 chords, and there's very little going on with the guitars. The chorus is totally being carried by the bass and the drums, and the guitars are only there for ambience. Let me show you that. That's the first chorus. Now, I want to show you the second chorus. It is the same exact progression, except that the guitars are now distorted. They're playing the exact same chords, same voicings and all that, except we added a lead guitar now. Let's listen to that. So now that we heard the second chorus, you'll realize that the first chorus was actually massively stripped down from what happens in the second chorus. Like I mentioned, we added a few guitars, and here's a cool thing that happens in this song. The lead guitars are playing this arpeggio here. This was also foreshadowed in a way, but a bit in the background, by the synthesizer in the first chorus. Listen here. And speaking of foreshadowing, that is something that you should do in your music. Sometimes it can smoothen out transitions between two completely different parts, and adding a little bit of that foreshadowing aspect to your music gives it just more depth, and crazy changes don't seem as crazy anymore, or at least not as random. Especially if you listen to the songs more often. I'm sorry, I just banged against the microphone here. Especially if you listen to the song more often, it will give it more depth. Now, speaking of foreshadowing, here's one last example that I want to show you when it comes to songwriting structure. Like I mentioned, metal lives off its crazy rhythms, and sometimes I like to foreshadow a riff by playing its rhythm before that riff comes in. And let's check this build-up riff right before the breakdown comes in, and pay attention to what the drummer is doing on the kick drum, all while the guitars are basically just playing an open chord and a few notes here and there. After the build-up, you'll hear the breakdown section. Let me show you that right here. Pay attention to the kick drum. All right, you get the idea of that. So what I did here is basically the drums are playing the rhythm that will be played in the breakdown after the build-up. And that can be very, very powerful, and it can build a lot of tension. And when the breakdown actually hits, that's a huge, huge release. And it sounds so much more powerful having had that kick drum rhythm in there. I have one bonus idea. Now, you can take apart those crazy rhythms, literally like take them apart and put in some filler melodies in there. Basically, make an evolution out of the same initial idea that you had. And here's how that sounds. That's some inputs from my side into how you can spice up your songwriting structures. All right, that was it. Thank you so much for watching this video and sticking around. If you have any suggestions on what topic I should tackle next, please leave them down below in the description. Meanwhile, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.